Please welcome Mr. Gerard Mansour.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'd also like to join and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and their elders past and present. Welcome everybody, what a wonderful day. I put the theme of the conference into practice today. My office is based at 50 Lonsdale Street, so I walked here, but I drew the line of coming up the stairs. I did catch the lift, I'll be honest to that part of it. So I'd like to also acknowledge Linda Martin, CEO of Move. In the past, previously, I've led peak bodies and I know the critical importance of peak bodies, so I'd like to acknowledge your work, Linda, and the team at Move. And from an older person's perspective, there's no doubt that mobility and remaining active in their community is a critical issue, so your leadership around research, education, advocacy are all critically important, so thank you for the work that you do. I think today and the concept of partnership is a particularly important one for older people, but before I say a few things about the conference or your forum today, just a couple of things about me and my role. As Commissioner for Senior Victorians, I'm coming up towards the third year of this appointment. I'm the first ever and the only Commissioner for seniors across Australia. So I think I applaud the government for being willing to have an access and a voice to the interests of older Victorians. The key things that I do is provide advocacy and policy advice to government, a key role around community education, helping our community get a better understanding of what it's like to be an older person here in Victoria, and also what I call referral pathways. I often connect older people with the appropriate organisations or supports that they need for advice. Simon mentioned that the government did earlier this year launch my report on isolation and loneliness of older people, and I'd like to share with you a few of the key findings that I have and my learnings as I prepared that report. I think any time that we run activities at a local level, we'll always find there's a group of very active, motivated older people that are going to come. And just because you get older doesn't mean that you automatically are disinterested or lack motivation. And so you'll find that there's always a group of people that are motivated and be there. But my report was trying to give a voice to another group of people. And I met in 6 locations across Victoria on what I call a listening tour. And I wanted to understand what are the drivers of isolation and loneliness of older people. The international research tells us that at any one time, about 10% of people aged over 60 will be experiencing chronic isolation and loneliness, to the degree that it's a significant barrier for them to be involved in life and in community activities. And when I talk about isolation and loneliness, the sense of isolation is the measurable thing, how many times somebody would be involved in an event or an activity or communicate and meet other people. The sense of loneliness, that's the personal feeling, the one of feeling alone, often accompanied with other feelings of despair, etc. So when the two come together, that can be enormously disabling. And just think about the raw numbers. We've got about 1.1 million people in Victoria aged over 60. On those maths, 110,000 people today are experiencing chronic isolation and loneliness somewhere in Victoria. By 2031, only 15 years from now, that's 1.9 million people aged over 60, 190,000 Victorians. So this is a growing issue. What I learnt from the listening tour are a couple of key things that I'd like to share with you. The first, that one of the barriers for older people is that often as they grow old, the journey is an experience of disconnection. And so that whether they've been involved with their family, been involved with the workforce, as they go through the seniors' years, they get less connected to the community around them. Their friends change. Some of their friends pass away. The community around them changes. Their children often move interstate or other places of the state or move overseas. And so for a whole lot of older people, the journey of ageing is equally accompanied with what I'd call this journey of disconnection. Second thing that I learned is that often through that journey also is this loss of confidence and how difficult and a challenging thing that is. So many of us just take for granted if we advertise and promote an activity, stacks of people will come and walk in the room. There's another whole group of people that haven't got that confidence. And so the role of organisations at the local level is critically important. The third thing I learnt that I'd like to share with you is, for now and for the foreseeable future, and I mean over at least the next decade, Older people are going to be looking for place-based opportunities to participate. They're going to be looking for opportunities to participate in their local community, near their local community, and they're going to be physical type interactions. And so there will be a growing role for social media, but it won't replace, in my view, the critical importance of opportunities for people to gather physically. And that means that the work you're doing is just so important. You can see how each of the things I've talked about, with a focus on physical activity, because we know its critical importance to the journey of ageing, how you can also start to address the critical elements. And I'd pose to you that the challenge isn't to put a notice on a board somewhere and suddenly find that the knowing people walk in the room. I think the challenge is to identify and find the group of people who, in my original training as youth worker, we would have called outreach work. The people who are going to benefit from the program who aren't intuitively going to come along. How do we identify those people? How do we find those people? And generally the good news is older people know who they are. And so you'll tend to find that when you talk and unpack it, some older people that are involved in your activities will know other older people who would definitely benefit and appreciate being involved, but some barrier exists for those people. A couple of stories I'd like to share with you from older people themselves that to me crystallise as part of what I'm talking about. I can remember a man got up, he was only in his late 60s, and he shared his experiences of isolation and loneliness and what it had done for his confidence. And he was a professional guy, and he was very articulate in the room. There was only 20 or 30 people in the room at that stage, and he was quite open and sharing his story. And he was saying that he went along to a local organisation on 2 occasions. But his experiences, no one even spoke to him. He didn't feel included, and he went on 2 occasions and he didn't go again. And I can tell you, for him now to get the energy and the effort and the inspiration to try that again will be a much more difficult experience. And contrast that with a lady who was in her early 80s that talked about her experience of being a bowler, and she loved her lawn bowls, and she'd gone through the phase and found she couldn't bowl anymore. But the group didn't let her disappear, and she shared with some delight the story that every Wednesday night was their dinner night, and somebody from that group made sure that she was a part of that group. And as she talked, you could get the sense of passion from her experience of just what it meant for her, that group owned her involvement and didn't let her drift away, like often happens in organisations as we age. So I share those practical experiences of older people so that as you go through today, you can do something that I do all the time. And I ask myself, how would older people think about that? But you start to segment them and think about not older people as an average or a group, but individual people that fit in all different experiences, people from non-English speaking background. What would it have been like to be one of the early migrants coming here in the 50s or 60s, being a woman and still not have very good English and find that your family aren't there to support you? How are we going to reach out to people like those, often women? How are we going to reach out to people with mobility challenges? How can we engage with the growing number of people that are moving into retirement, that are very interested in volunteering and looking for opportunities to give something back to life? Think about communication. One of the things that I found as I went around, I was surprised. My knowledge of what exists in most local communities is pretty good from my professional background and experience, and I was always surprised the number of older people who would in the room bemoan the lack of opportunities to participate, and yet I knew that so many things existed in their community for them, and for some reason they weren't aware of them. So basic communication and information and ways to access older people is important. The diversity challenges, people from different sexuality options, from cold backgrounds, people with loss of confidence. Think about costs. You know, there's a whole group of older people for whom cost is a really critical barrier. How do we address issues like cost? So these are all part of the elements of what I call as seniors-friendly and age-friendly practice. It's a critical importance of the work we do. Is how do we build not just seniors organisations that themselves are inclusive, but that all organisations in a local community recognise that our community is going through a process of change. We are going to have more older people living in our community, living healthier and active for a longer period of time. They're going to be great people to be involved in local community organisations. But for many older people, that experience isn't the case. As they age, they find in their words, they often shared with me a story that becoming older was almost like becoming invisible. They'd use language and words like that. And so I'd ask you today, as you go through today, to think about that group of people. There'll always be a group of people that, just like the rest of the population, are hugely motivated self-starters, and they're a really important part. And I'm not in any way suggesting that all older people have lost their confidence. But what I am saying, that as people age, this is a critical challenge they face. And you have then the multiplier effect. And I think this is the most challenging thing for older people. As you age, you start to deal with multiple challenges in different places. So it's some type of physical challenge, less people in your family and your community network to be involved in, some impact on your confidence, a lack of information and understanding what's available in the community. And for many older people, they're still not engaged with the internet and social ways of advertising and communicating. And so if you get things to them in very simple ways, that's fine. But they also shared with me the challenges of trying to navigate websites and going from one thing to another and then getting lost, and how do you get back where you started. So we've got to think about some of the most practical things when we consider communication. And so for many of us, social media, mobile devices are just part of our life. It's not necessarily the case for older people. Some are, and are highly intuitive and embracing the new technologies. Others find that still a significant challenge. So as you go through today and as you take away learnings from today, think about the broad range of older people. Think about the people who'd benefit from the enormously positive and important work you do, who won't find you. You've got to find them. And that's an important part of the work that we all do, is providing opportunities to participate for senior Victorians. So thank you for an opportunity to open today's forum. I hope it's very informative and learning, and most importantly, I hope that you take some things away from today that you can put in practice in your work on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.